seen some comments to say, gee, these numbers are a wake-up call that although the sentiment has become positive after the political leadership changes we saw at the ANC's December National Conference with Cyril Ramaphosa now also as the state president since February, it actually takes quite a long time to come out of the rut.
I think that's a very fair assessment of the situation. I believe that there was what they call Ramaphoria after Ramaphosa became president and said he was going to do this and that, the other, that there was an overly optimistic view of the extent to which he could uplift the economic growth rate and start creating jobs in next to no time. Clearly, such a process takes a long, long while, if not many years, and it's going to take implementation of policies first before we can start seeing.
Yeah. And that has to be, that implementation has to be seen over time.
That implementation needs to be seen over time and is being made extremely difficult by what one is seeing as a pushback on the part of many of the opponents of President Ramaphosa from within the ANC against many of the policies that he's trying to do.
How soon should we expect this renewed confidence that we've seen, this renewed sentiment, translate into stronger investment, for example, and growth of the economy?
You know, you first of all investors need time to decide to invest, and then once they take the decisions to invest, it again takes quite a lot of time to get the processes in place to actually make that investment. So I think it's very doubtful that we'll see major increases in investment before 2019.
Yeah, I mean, President Cyril Ramaphosa, when he made his State of the Nation address, and I also, in terms of the forecast for the economy, he was speaking about above 2% in terms of the GDP growth. Are we now going to have to revise downward the forecast? I mean, you as an economist, are you going now to be revising your forecast downward?
I may revise it down slightly, but I also acknowledge that there were many statistical distortions that actually exaggerated the extent of the apparent downturn in the first quarter, as was the case a year ago. You remember we were supposed to have had a recession a year ago, and then it turned out that we didn't have a recession after all when the figures subsequently came to be revised.
Are you saying
upwards.
that the numbers are not entirely accurate?
I'm not saying that they're not accurate. I don't believe that we understand fully the statistical and seasonal processes that actually affect these numbers. And in a way, the weakness of the first quarter is a direct mirror of the unexpectedly strong fourth quarter figures. If you recall back 3 months ago, people were amazed that the economy had shown growth of over 3% in the fourth quarter. Well, to some extent, we're now comparing against a very high base, and so you get this big downturn.
Okay, now the last quarter of the year might be fueled by sometimes retail and stuff like that.
Correct, and it did.
And it did, but now we're seeing manufacturing, mining and agriculture contributing negatively to the first quarter, I mean, of this year.
That is very concerning because they are the sectors in which one would hope one could absorb unskilled workers most easily, and they are the ones that are slowing most.
Yeah, are we diversifying enough the base? I mean, the portfolio here, mining, we've historically relied on it. We know how important agriculture is, but we've been hit by drought in the Western Cape, one of the worst droughts we've seen also in the Eastern Cape. I mean, shouldn't we try and look for, as people are saying, more industrialization?
That is the desire, but so long as the educational and skills outcomes in the country are so weak, we are never going to manage to industrialize and compete with other countries that are doing so, most notably China, but also many other Asian countries. So what we see is a continuation of the trend that we've seen over the last 2 decades, whereby the South African economy is becoming more and more a services economy rather than a mining or manufacturing.
So the challenge we're facing, from what you're saying, is not just upskilling our workforce, it's also reskilling them to meet the needs of the new economic challenges, also what is known as a fourth industrial revolution.
Very much so, and part of the problem that we have is that there is a mismatch between the kind of skills that are needed for that fourth industrial revolution and what we're actually producing. Most notably, the shocking outcomes in terms of mathematics. We're worrying about making history compulsory when we should be really worrying more about getting a higher throughput in mathematics and science in the economy.
So literacy and numeracy should be the name of the game. Okay, there's a G7 summit coming up at the end of the week in Canada, in Mumbai. I understand that maybe South Africa might be represented there. What would the message be if you were advising whoever is going? Let's say President Ramaphosa will be going to the G7. What message should he be taking there in terms of his international, current global investment drive?
In terms of his investment drive, he has to make it quite clear that he is now taking firm action to root out corruption, to improve education and skills, to address the tensions that exist in the labour market between employers and workers, and to encourage small business and entrepreneurship. He needs to persuade people that he's doing that. We haven't seen enough of that, but he has to try and persuade people that that's his intention. It does form part of his New Deal, but we have not yet seen enough of that being put into place, partly, as I say, because of pushback from other elements within the ruling party.
Okay, on the back of this latest fuel price increase, AA telling us as well on ENC that July we might see another fuel increase. We've seen the price of oil internationally going up slightly, the rand not doing so well against the US dollars currently, so it might really be tough for us as consumers going forward. We saw a bit of a flip in consumer confidence after also Cyril Ramaphosa took over the ANC and became president. Consumer confidence, consumer going to be very hit hard from today.
Unfortunately, consumer confidence is likely to fall. I think we're going to hear that number being released in the next few weeks, and that will show that. You've had the increase in the rate of VAT. You've had the increase in fuel prices. You've also having big increases in personal taxes that people are not realizing because they're getting salary increases that are pushing them up the tax ladder, and that tax ladder hasn't been compensated accordingly. So I definitely see a slowdown in the rate of growth in consumer spending. But to start talking about a collapse, I think, is far too premature. I think that there's been undue exuberance in consumer spending over the last 6 months, especially over Black Friday, and we're going to see a reaction to that in terms of lower growth. But I still think there will be some growth.
Dr. Jammine, thank you very much for your insights and your time as usual. Chief Economist at Econometrix, Dr. Azar Jammine.